here on the west branch of the Westfield River, which is the last free-running branch of the Westfield, out in Middlefield, Mass. And this whole area has now been preserved as open space through the Mass Wildlands Project. That was a project where a stamp was placed on the back of every hunting and fishing license in the state, and it raises about $1.5 million to buy land for open space to preserve it. I'm really pleased about this. This is one of the pinnacle points of my artistic career, to have had something so marvelous as an area of wilderness like this to be preserved.
Hi, I'm Jim Rosenthal. Welcome to Eye on Art.
Hi, and I'm Carla Santia. Jim, today we're here at the Artists in Indian Orchard Mills in the studio of Ed Snyder.
Should be a great show for our viewers today. Ed has retraced the history of printing from the stone printing presses up to the modern G-clay processes, and he's going to be explaining that for our audience.
Yep, and I think they should find it very interesting, and we're also going to learn about his notoriety in terms of his work with the natural wildlife and being recognized by some outstanding people here in Massachusetts.
I think it'll be a very interesting episode, so let's get started.
Ed, tell us about how you got your start as an artist.
Well, it seems that all my life I was an artist, as far back as I can remember. But it really started back when I was in 5th grade in Indian Orchard Elementary. We had these huge murals that had to be done, and I wanted so much to work on one of these murals. And I wasn't picked. So I came into the class the next day for show and tell, and I showed this big picture I had painted. And I was automatically charged with not only being able to paint the mural, but being in charge of everybody else. So I was the art director at 10 years old. Subsequently, the Peanuts characters were really a hot item back then, and I loved drawing Charles Schultz's characters. And people wanted to buy them. And my mother had just gotten a new printing machine, a Xerox copier. This is back in 1967 at the place where she worked, and she was running copies off for me. And I would have entire print editions that I would sell for $0.25 to the rest of my classmates. So I was actually an art director and selling print editions back when I was 10 years old.
So you were a natural artist, natural printer, and a natural entrepreneur at the age of 10.
That's right.
Well, that's a very interesting story. Tell us now a little bit about the evolution of your printmaking.
Well, after high school, I decided I was going to try to find a school somewhere in the country where I could really take my talents to the limit. And I was very hard-pressed to find the kind of school that I was looking for. I talked to several artists, professional artists all over the place, and they told me to find someone who could take me by the hand and teach me the craft of painting. Mm-hmm. And I found a little school here in Springfield, and Paul Scott was the director, and he took me by the hand, literally, and showed me how to draw and paint. He gave me a big carrot. He dangled that in front of me. He said he was looking for someone to take over the business, and I might be that person. So I worked really hard, and I did this outstanding pencil drawing that immediately he knew he had found what he was looking for. His one student that he could pour every last drop of knowledge into before he retired. And I did large, elaborate paintings. I went on to do my teaching classes on my own, mm-hmm. teaching classes there. And I wanted to get involved in printmaking. I saw that that was a good way to make a living, is through the printing process. It took me so long to hand paint one original picture. I would spend sometimes 3-4 months working on a picture, and there was no way I could get the kind of money for that kind of time. Most people wanted to pay $100 for a painting. Right. I was just a young kid. So printmaking was very appealing because I could sell prints for a small, a reasonable price that mm-hmm. just about anybody could afford. And I found that I couldn't afford it. When I went out to some of these printmaking places, it would cost, I found it cost $2,500 to $5,000 to have an edition made, and not always were you satisfied with the results.
Right.
So, and I just didn't have that. I wanted to do 10 different prints. I didn't have $50,000 in my back pocket to do it. So I took up hand printmaking. And my grandmother had taught me at a young age to look for we used to go to auctions and we'd look for Koreanized prints, and she showed me what the difference between an original and a reproduction print was. And so it was always instilled in me from very young that original printmaking was a much more valuable item.
Right. So tell us now a little bit about this journey with you not being able to afford a limited edition, which a lot of artists can't, which makes it very difficult, and how you came about doing your own.
Well, okay, this is a piece I did. It only took a short period of time. A piece like this could be painted in a few days, and I was trying to commercialize in an effort. I figured it was useless to try to have prints made. So, but again, it's a lot of involvement coming up with a new image every time, especially if you're going to get involved with this kind of detail. And not only did I go overboard with the detail, I took a course in sailing and seamanship, so I understand the workings of the ship. I always get really involved. I'll talk about that in a little more. But anyways, this particular piece, I found this in a catalog. I found a printmaking method that was reasonably inexpensive, and this was called litho sketch. And what you do is you draw a picture of the image. Actually, it has to be drawn in reverse with a grease pencil, and it's very similar to the stone lithography process. Okay, you can see that I drew the image backwards so that would print forward. This is the actual print I get, and it was kind of a weak print. It was difficult to get this kind of a print. Basically, you would put the paper down on there and rub it with a burn and try to get as much pressure as you possibly could. The next thing, when you pull the image off, it was actually in reverse, so I was able to get a right-reading image. And then I would go back and hand color each one like this. And this particular plate, as you see, is starting to disintegrate. I would get maybe a dozen prints off of these.
Okay, so in the process of creating your own prints with this, you discovered something that led you to your next step.
Exactly. I was reading the paper and I saw an advertisement for a little class down at the Springfield Art Museums in ball green plate lithography. And I says, wow, this sounds like it's going to be just what I need to eliminate the problem of only a handful of prints being made on these paper plates. So this was one of my first ball grain plates. And basically this is a stone lithograph. It's done on a stone finished plate. It's the same as a stone process. And what I do is I draw right on the plate with a grease pencil. And there's an acid etching process you go through. And basically what happens is you wet the plate. And when you roll the plate with oil-based ink, the ink only adheres to where you drew with the grease pencil. As long as that plate's wet, it'll reject the ink. So you put your piece of paper down, and I ran it through a little pressure press that I made with a washing machine wringer. I found
the old wooden roller ones?
Exactly. I found this out in the woods. It was, and at the time I was taking the class, I knew it cost about $10,000 for a litho press. And my wife, she didn't like the idea. Oh boy, you're getting into money. I can see this is coming. When I found that old press, she was out hiking with me, ringer. She said, I mentioned that it could possibly be converted into a press, and she helped me lug it out of the woods for me. It was amazing.
It was worth saving the $10,000.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. Well, anyways, I would run the print through the press, then you'd pull it off like so, and you'd get a reverse print exactly like in the other print. And then there's one here, and this is one of the hand-colored images there. Now, I could get about 50 to 100 prints this way, depending on how many you actually wanted to print. And I believe I had the edition set at 60.
So how long would it take you to make this limited edition of 60? In terms of time, I mean,
It could be done
real time.
in one day. I mean,
Even the hand coloring?
the creating of the image,
Right.
inking of the press, and pulling prints all day, you could probably pull 60 in one day.
And then there's the additional time of hand coloring.
The hand
so
coloring.
that you end up with this as a product.
Exactly. The hand coloring takes about an hour to 2 hours to hand color each one, which isn't a lot of time, but when you think about the reason you want to be an artist in the first place is it's a creative thing, and when you start hand coloring print after print, it becomes a monotonous chore, and it kills it for you.
I think it's important for our audience to know this so that then they have an understanding of why artists command a certain price. Even though it's a limited edition, there's a great deal of individual work that goes into each piece. So consequently, they should know this.
Exactly. It depends. I'm saying an hour to 2 hours. This is an awfully small piece.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you get all the little details in there. I want to make sure it's a nice looking image,
Right.
and I want to spend some time with it when I sit down and paint it. But when you get involved with larger images, then it gets to be more of a tedious chore.
So let me ask you a question. How long did this old washing machine, Ringer washing machine, serve you as a printer?
It served me for several years, and one of the things was I've got several editions of Indian artifacts that I had printed, and I was becoming known for this type of thing. And there was a contest that the state had for designing the archery and primitive firearm stamp, and it was the perfect thing for me to promote myself. If I could win this stamp contest, this would give me that little extra tag of importance to my work and give me a bit of a name. So I entered this contest. I designed this piece here, and this was a piece designed. It was an archery and primitive firearm stamp, and I did some research on this. This is a Wampanoag Indian bow. It was dated back to 1670, and it's one of the only Eastern Indian bows left in the state, and it's out at the Peabody Museum, part of Harvard College. And I went out there and researched it and incorporated it into the image. These are two antlers that were found from a shed deer, and shed antlers from a deer at Quabbin Reservoir, and it's a Pennsylvania long rifle. And that's my actual powder horn that I had since I was a little kid going around the flea markets with my grandmother, and it had to be in there. But anyways, that became a stamp, and I hand-made my prints still and hand-colored them, but I found I had an enormous following immediately, and I had to come up with at least 100 prints. I had orders so backed up that the hand coloring was going to take me forever, and I panicked. In the meantime, I actually won the contest again for a second time, and this was an image. I decided to have the people shooting this stuff from the first stamp and the second one, and this is an Eastern Woodlands Indian and an Eastern Long Hunter, and he's actually got that long bow and the gun in there, and these are people I know. I got involved with historical reenactments through this whole thing, and now I had two images. I won them back to back. I couldn't believe it. I was really lucky like that, and but they were perfect images for that stamp. And
now you're still doing these with your little Ringer
this is the
washing
Ringer
machine.
press, and that's an interesting point too, because I won these stamp contests with original prints, where most artists are hand painting an original piece and then bringing it out and having it reproduced. I actually won these with stone lithographs, and I think I'm one of the few people in the whole country who's ever won a, these are national contests.
Right,
and they put
are.
these out. And to win that was quite an honor, but to win it with an original print was even more so.
Right. Okay, so what did you do to eliminate the problem of the limitations of making a small edition and then being able to make a larger edition?
Well, I knew I had to hand color or get away from hand coloring editions, and I had to start printing my own colors. I went down to the Springfield Library again and just coincidentally happened to find a book that was out of print. Only a handful were ever made, and the artist who devised this new method was up in Vermont, and he was surprised. I got a chance to meet him, and he's surprised I even found his book. But it got me on a whole new thing where I was using offset plates, but hand drawing my separation. So I'm hand drawing my film, as opposed to in the offset world they would shoot an image with 4-color separation film. All right. Now, using the same plates, I would hand draw my separations and then lay them down one at a time. You can see how this is the original key tone. Okay. And then what I would do is I would hand draw on the Mylar. I would actually trace this on this paper like this, and this allowed me to print on that same type of material. And then I would go back in and hand draw each different. I had to think in terms of color in black and white. And this was it was like a yellow ochre, and it was a tough color to mix. I had to hand mix my own color, and I call this buckskin. So it's not a traditional 4-color separation. I had to mix my own ink and opaque inks as I saw I needed them. These are two different other ones. You can see the different plates that were drawn. And this was the flesh tone, so I put flesh tones down here, and then other reds, and then another black or a darker brown. And when this ketone went back on top, this is the image that you would get. So it took about 6 plates to get a colored image. And it wasn't completely colored. I would still go back in there and add hand coloring touches to bring it up to life. And but it brought my hand coloring down to a minimal. You know, so it was actually a pleasure to sit there and put the hand coloring touches, sign and number the print.
So how many of an edition would you be able to do in this process?
It's practically unlimited.
Unlimited.
I mean, you know, but there are limitations when you're hand doing a print. Sometimes the plate will disintegrate. I tried on the first one that I did to print 300, which is an awfully large edition. But I figured being a stamp, I would need to do an edition that large. And subsequently, I didn't sell that many prints. And I numbered this one at 500, but what I do is I print out 100 at a time. All right? I spend a week doing a small part of the edition and leave it open to I could possibly print out 500 as a total edition, but I've never gotten that far.
Well, so now you're on a roll, and you're looking to further your education and your expertise in printmaking.
Well,
where did you go from here?
Well, actually, I stayed with this for a little bit, and I took on a couple of important commissions. And this one was for Ducks Unlimited, and this was the actual 3-color print. All right, and what I did was I put a yellow, a green. I just did not want to hand paint these leaves. And this commission came to me, it was after I had done these stamps, someone had seen my process, and they needed a small edition of prints. And a sculptor had sculpted this little scene in honor of the fact that Ducks Unlimited made a purchase of property off the Concord River in Massachusetts, and that's called the Pantry Brook Marsh Program. And MARSH stood for Matching Aid to Restore States Habitat. And what happened was, let me show the hand-colored one. This is the hand-colored version. I had done a couple different plates, and then I hand-colored the image. I also put after the sculpture of Rick Roth. He was the carver that had carved the original image. They had one for their big banquet and unveiling, and this was a commemorative print to commemorate the fact that Ducks Unlimited had gone into a partnership with the state of Mass to purchase this land and put in this quality project. This particular image signifies, symbolizes the first types of wildlife that will inhabit the area. And this is a marsh wren, and she's protecting her nesting territory from a little painted turtle who's sneaking his head in there on her nesting ground. So it was a nice piece, and I enjoyed doing it. At the DU banquets, this sold for, I beat out national artists.
Once again.
It was unbelievable. You know, I had a great time with this. It was, they called this the ladies' print, and the ladies would love it. You know, all the stuff was real, you know, rustic and woodsy and wood ducks and everything. When this piece came up, the ladies would go crazy. You know, their husbands would drag them to these
And we know who spends the money.
Right. I saw a lot of white-faced men going, "Oh my God, that's going, you know, $300-400 for the print." And, so.
Wow.
Another piece I did, and that's right after this piece, was the Governor Weld fishing flag. And a group had commissioned, had tied a flag to commemorate some of the work that Governor Weld had done for different conservation groups. And they asked me if I would do a print of the flag. And not only did I do the print, but I went out to the governor's office and I had him sign the entire edition. He was flattered.
Wow.
There was 150 of those, and I still have quite a few left. And that was an honor thing. You know, it was another, as opposed to having a stamp and an important commission, now I had the governor's signature on an image.
So after this glorious moment with Governor Weld, what followed?
Well, I was approached by a gentleman from the National Wild Turkey Federation, Joe Judd. He was the president here in Massachusetts, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing the Mass First Estate turkey print in honor of the fact that Governor Weld had made the turkey the Mass State game bird. And he wanted a 3-part series. He was going to have the governor sign it, and he's explaining all this to me when he asked me, and I'm like seeing stars. I'm like, oh my God, this is really starting to snowball. And I didn't answer him right away, and he just walked away. He goes, well, if you're not interested. And I had to literally chase him for a second and say, no, I want it so bad. I can't believe it. But anyways, it was a real honor. Governor Weld signed 50 of these prints, This was the first, and it was a 3-part series. And because I got involved with historical reenactment, I wanted to keep the next two in historical themes. So I chose a picture of the last Tom turkey in Massachusetts was killed on Mount Tom in Holyoke, Mass. In 1851, and I documented that scene. And I also did the scene of my rendition of the first Thanksgiving turkey being harvested by a young Wampanoag Indian. The second piece on Mount Tom, that piece was a mylar like this, and I did about, I would have to say I hand drew almost 30 different plates to get that image up to satisfy the National Wild Turkey Federation, the people's needs. You know, they wanted photorealism. That's their thing. And I brought this thing to realms that I just didn't think was possible. But it was so hard. 30 plates. I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? It was too much. So that led me to my next image, which also was a great conservation piece and led to a purchase of a lot of land here in Massachusetts. This is the Massachusetts Wildland stamp. I was commissioned by the state to do this. It was a contract bid. I created the artwork, I did the prints, and I ran the program for 1 year. And this particular piece, the stamp is put on every hunting and fishing license in the state and generates about $1.5 million to buy land to keep it as open space for the wildlife. And this particular piece was, I had to go out and catch a brook trout, and it's a little setting up by Knightville Dam, and it was very dear to my heart, the setting. The whole program was great, but they wanted a reproduction style print, and I didn't want to just do a regular reproduction print, so I chose a stochastic dot screen. And when I got the screen, I still hand-pulled my own images. I got the screen, I hand-pulled this, I hand-burned my plates, and hand-made my own prints. But I got a chance to see a 4-color separation done in stochastic dot style, which differs from the regular style. And I know this is getting very technical, but it's very difficult to draw from a standard halftone dot separation. It's hard to read what's going on.
Right.
The grays in a halftone are created by the 3 colors coming together. So this screen doesn't create any grays. Black makes the gray, color makes all the color, and it's easy to see that and draw from that. So I was extremely excited when I saw this. So I was able to go in and start to generate this on a computer myself. I took some computer courses, and I learned how to separate an image so that it could be hand-drawn in a minimal amount of plates and still retain the original print quality.
So this is, in a sense, a little bit, this has origins of being computer generated.
Oh yes, absolutely. There was an original piece that was made and was scanned. It was still, though, hand printed.
Right.
Okay. And having worked with the computer, the next process that came along, and it's everybody, this is all the rage now, is a new G-clay process where we're using a computer to generate the image. I'm actually creating images on computer. This was a scan of a painting that I had done of one of these old archways out in Chester, Mass. These date back to the 1800s when the first railway went out to Boston through Albany. And this place is very dear to my heart. All these mountains here, there's several of these trestles out there. And at one time, there was a lot of building that was starting out there. And it looked like there was going to be a big condo project up on the side of this hill. And
scary thought.
Yeah, it is, all right? Because it's a beautiful area. And Abraham Lincoln took the ride on this train, I heard at one time. And these are like ancient relics out there. Well, right after printing this, taking this stamp project here, I found out later on that the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife turned around and bought this area with the money from my stamp. Oh, it's dear to my heart, and it's like,
I'm sure
and now it's preserved for all time, and I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. So the only thing that's missing is I would have liked to have my name on the park.
Oh, come on.
Can't have everything, no, huh? This process, as nice as it is, it's starting to become kind of a reproductive process for a lot of people, and I don't see it standing the test of time. These prints can last maybe 70 years, but there's still a lot missing in the fact that I'm an original printmaker. If I create something on a computer and I do it out as a Giclée print, that's fine. But when I use it to reproduce another painting, and a lot of other artists are doing it now, it becomes a reproductive process. And there's no longer that hand-pulled mystique to the image.
So it sounds to me as if you're not completely satisfied with the giclée process.
This is true. It's because I'm an original printmaker. Hand printing is what I like to do. So what I've decided to do is go back to my roots. And this is an image that I had done a long time ago. And I only made maybe one or two of these.
Okay.
And this is the ball grain stone style plate. This was the print that I got. And this is the hand colored version. And what I did was I took the image, brought it into the computer, excuse me, and separated it in a way that I took the black out so that I could re-roll the original black tone on there, and it will look something like this when it's done. All right, and we'll go on to the press right now, and we'll see if we can pull one off.
Okay.
All right.
So you start with the giclée,
Right,
and then you're bringing it back to
the old
Your
stone
original.
on top. And it recreates the stone lithograph pre-hand colored for me. I think I'm one of the few people in the country that has devised such a method.
Ed, tell us a little bit about what you've set up here for us.
Okay, what I have is the giclée print, which has the colors and a little bit of the gray. All right, what we're going to do is take the original stone image, hand-balled grain plate there, hand-drawn image, and print it on top of the giclée print.
So you're
And
going
this
to
will
take us through a dry run here.
Yeah.
Great.
And let me explain about my press. This is a stone lithograph press. It's not the usual direct press that most people are familiar with. This is a turn-of-the-century press, which is actually an offset stone litho press. And what it does is it picks up the image wrong reading and then redeposits it right reading. This is important. A lot of times when you're drawing with these particular images, you have to draw with mirrors or think in reverse. And if you're going to do any kind of type, you have to do it backwards. So this eliminates that. And that was the original reason why they went with the offset that way. And this is the same type of press that's used in modern day lithography, all with big motors and dampening systems and everything else, and it's all automated with computers now. So this is about 100 years old, and it does a fine job. There's very few of these left in the world. I was lucky to get my hands on one. I'll take you through a dry run of how this process would work.
Great.
Basically, I would wet my sponge and then dampen the image and make sure it was not over wet, but just lightly damp. And I charge my ink roller and starting in one corner, work back and forth. Again, the process works on as long as the plate is wet, it won't take ink. But where you drew with the grease pencil, the ink will take readily.
Right.
Then you want to make sure you make as many passes as you can to get it inked up as full as possible. And when you see that it's about right, and that's actually the ink that I would use is on there now. Next step would be to drop the roller down, and it engages it to the plate. And so pick up the image on the rubber blanket here.
Right.
The cylinder weighs about 1,500 pounds, and that's where it gets its pressure. So go over the image, and voila, there's the finished product, saving me a lot of time, marrying the two different worlds. The brand new giclée system and going back to 1790 with the old stone litho
Remarkable.
process, creating a new original print.
Very good. I'm really very impressed. It's beautiful. You would never even know
Thank you.
that it was not done by any other means than the old method.
Yeah.
So now, what does the future hold for Ed Snyder?
Well, like I said a little while ago, I wanted to go back and use the computer to generate these separations and then hand draw them completely and get away from any giclée process at all. So, and then I'm going to get back into my old historical themes that I've started but never finished. I have so many pieces that I want to do. I get all dressed up in these reenactment clothes, and I go out with all these people. And it's like going back in time, and there was so much work I wanted to do. It was so difficult because the process was holding me back. Now with this new process, I should be able to steamroll right ahead.
And we'll be able to say we knew Ed Snyder when. I think it's wonderful that you, as an artist, can continue with your passion in creating, but also your passion for history and the evolution of what's happened here in the Valley. I think it's wonderful. I'm very lucky.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you so much. This has been a wonderful experience, not only for me, but I'm sure with the rest of our audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your show.